All right, guys. So these are about the results you can expect. So I was recording, but I've had some recording issues due to Google Chrome blocking my ability to record. I finally found a free and open source application that you can run, and it prevents anything from blocking NVIDIA Shadowplay from recording. Of course, if you have this application running, you can't watch like Netflix or anything like that because they use this program called Widevine. All Chromium browsers implement this, and basically they communicate with the website and they'll actively try to flag windows so that it creates a flag, and NVIDIA looks for this flag, NVIDIA Shadowplay. And if NVIDIA Shadowplay sees this flag, it'll immediately stop the recording process. So, yeah, I lost a lot of hours before I finally realized what exactly was causing that, like on the software level. So, yeah. So I'm going to break all this down for you guys in explicit detail. I've already set it up, unfortunately, but I will go through the setup process with you again. I did initially record the process of me setting this up, but unfortunately, like I said, even though that I had closed Google Chrome, let me do this. So even though I had closed Google Chrome, it was actually, all it did is it moved itself from the apps process. When I closed it, it moved it into the background processes for some reason. And because when I closed it, there was Amazon Prime, video in one of the tabs. It just kept that flag there and prevented me from recording, and I thought I was recording. So anyway, yeah, I lost a lot of time that way. So I'm trying to redo this video because I've actually already recorded this process of it, but as you can see, it ended up being 3 hours of recording. So I'm going to try to condense this and make it a lot shorter. So let's just go ahead and get started because I don't want to waste any time. I want to try to explain this without it taking 3 hours. I know most people are not going to have 3 hours to spare to watch this video, or they just won't have the desire to. So let's just go ahead and get started. First of all, I left off where in the last video where we were actually creating the primary data assets. So I don't remember if I showed you how to create the bone mask one. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that again just to make sure. So if you don't know, they moved data assets from miscellaneous over into its own folder called data. And they have all the data stuff down here now, data tables and all that stuff, curves. And under the data asset category under data, you have data asset. Right here at the top, you'll see bone mask definition data asset. That's what the bone mask node requires, because it needs you to define the parameters for the bone parts, the different parts of the body that you're going to be masking. So that's what you would do is create that. And if it's a data asset of a primary data asset, I'll always prefix it with DA underscore. And you could call it DABM general. I don't know why I gave it such an elaborate name originally, but anyway, you'd go in here and you would need to select your skeleton. And then under the body part definition, you're going to name this body part definition. And so if it's a spine, you're going to name it spine. And then under branch filters, you're going to create branch filters. And this is basically exactly like a layered blend per bone. So if you come in here, you have branch filters or you have blend masks. So the bone mask only works with branch filters. And so you would, if you create a branch filter here, you're going to give it a bone name, and then you're going to give it a blend depth. So just to be a little elaborate, you have a spine 01, you have a thigh, you have a, a thigh L, thigh R, you have a pelvis, and you have a root. So if you gave the branch filter a bone name of root, then anything under root will be affected by this blend pose 0. Everything under the root will replace whatever's coming in base pose with blend pose 0. If it's the pelvis, then this will replace anything coming through here with the pelvis of this, as well as whatever's connected to the pelvis, the spine, the thigh, and the thigh R. And then same thing if you do thigh R, so on and so forth. So if you do the foot, then only the things under the foot, which would be the foot R, the ankle back R, the ankle, it actually doesn't have these bones. If they're grayed out with a gray dot, then that means this mesh, skeletal mesh, does not have those bones, but they exist on the skeleton asset. So, and then it would just include the foot R and the ball R if you did a branch filter starting on the foot R. Your blend depth is divided between the bones. So if you gave it spine 01, spine 01, and you gave it a blend depth of 4, then spine 01 on the incoming, this would be applied on spine 01 by 25%. It would apply spine 02 by 50%, spine 03 75%, spine 04 100%, so on and so forth. So if you gave it a blend depth of 3, it's probably going to be somewhere around 33.333, and then 66.666, and then I'm assuming it's going to round up to 100% on the third one. So that's basically how that works. Now, bone mask is just a sophisticated layered blend per bone. It gives you more flexibility. So regarding the bone mask and the layered blend per bone, you'll have a mesh space rotation blend. And the mesh space rotation blend will not affect transforms. It will only affect the rotational orientation of things. So if you used mesh space rotation blend on, say, the hand R, then it's going to replace the hand R on this with the hand R on this, but it's going to be oriented in mesh space. So if I come over here to the skeleton, and if the hand is right here, let me just grab the hand. Actually, let me go into the aiming pose. It'll be easier to show you in here. So we have our hand R here. I'm just going to move over to world space, and if on the locomotion, if the hand R is pointing down and we apply a mesh space rotation blend, and we replace that hand with the mesh space rotation blend on the locomotion with this aiming pose, then it's going to rotate that hand so that it's pointing in this direction in component space. If that is not checked, then it's not going to do it. It's not going to orient it in component space. And I say component space. Component space and mesh space are kind of the same thing. I like to call it component space because it makes it a little bit easier for you to understand. They use these things synonymously, depending on where you're at. But in a lot of cases, they're basically the same exact space. So you'll see somewhere they'll call it component space. Somewhere else they'll call it mesh space. And then on the control rig, they'll call it global space. So keep that in mind. If this isn't checked here, then it's going to be in local space. The thing about the bone mask, let me come over here to the actual bone mask asset here. So this is my bone mask data asset. The thing about the bone mask is that these layers have limited influence on each other, and I'll kind of explain how that works. And the reason why is because each of these is being applied, but they're being applied over the incoming pose. They can influence each other if they affect the same bones, and these are feathered if they have a blend depth, is what I mean. So I told you about how blend depth kind of like eases in to the pose. So if you had a blend depth of 4 on the spine, it would only be partially applied on the lower spine bones, but anything above, anything above spine 3, it would be applied 100%. That would include spine 04, spine 05, the clavicles and the arms and everything else, unless you exclude those. So over here on my default one, you'll see I'm actually excluding the hands, but I'm not excluding anything else. So -1 basically tells it to remove it. And the reason why I did that is because we'd actually never need this to influence the hands, because the arms are going to completely 100% override the hands in almost every situation. So we're blending the arms. We have a blend depth of 3, and we start it at the clavicle. And the reason why I do that is to prevent desync between whenever we're doing it in mesh space. I'm trying to prevent desync between the shoulder or the upper arm and the torso. So if you only apply partially a mesh space on the torso, but you apply it fully in mesh space on the arm, then the arm is going to be rigid, and it's going to be in this pose right here, and in a very rigid manner because it's in mesh space. But this torso is going to be twisting side to side, and it's going to create weird deformation issues around, where it goes from 20% or 40% to 100%. So that's why on my bone mask, I'm using a blend, an ease in. And I'm also using an ease in on the spine too. And it just gives a more natural layering effect whenever you start doing this. So I'll just show you here exactly how that works. So if I do spine 01, you'll see it automatically populates these. These are only for reference purposes. They're read only. You cannot change this. It automatically populates this stuff for you. And you can do a blend depth of 4. And then if you'll see it has 107 arrays in this element, that's quite a bit. You can reduce that to improve performance by removing whatever you don't need. So if I add hand L with a blend depth of 0, then it doesn't change anything because it's already there. And that's because, remember what I told you, is anything under the spine is going to be included. If I do a blend depth of -1, that tells it to exclude it, and you'll see it went from 104 to 84. or 107 to 84, and you'll see that it seems to be tracking index 20 for the child bone indices, but that's just for reference purposes, like I said. So the main four things you're going to need for this bone mask, and in actuality, oh yeah, I went over this part already with you. We're going to call this arm L, and we're going to add the clavicle R, clavicle L, my bad. And we're going to give this a blend depth of 3. And that means if we give it a blend depth of 3, if we come back over to this, and we come over here to clavicle L, a blend depth of 3 will include, it'll feather basically 33.3% of the clavicle L, 66.6% of the upper arm L, and then 100% of the lower arm L. And then the hand L will be 100% as well, and anything under the hand. So that's why we're doing that, because we do want the hand to be aiming in the direction we intended it to be aiming on our aiming pose. Because like I told you when we made these aiming poses, how accurate he's holding it in this pose within this scene will determine how accurate you can aim the rifle in the game. And then we would do the same thing for arm R. And then we would add one more. And you can call this whatever you can call it VB primary. I didn't actually give it I just called it VB. But it's going to be this, it's going to be whatever you call the virtual bone that you create, and I have not showed you how to create that yet. We haven't went through that. So what you would do is if you're only going to be holding the weapons in the right hand, then you only need to do this. You only need to make it for the right hand. But if you're going to have weapons that can be held in either hand, or weapons that are going to be held in the left hand, then you're going to need to do this for the left hand too. So I'll just go ahead and show you how to do this for the left hand, since I've already done it for the right hand. So on the Spine 05, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, and you don't necessarily have to do it on the spine. You could do it off of the clavicle. It's kind of up to you. It's going to be more stable if you do it off the clavicle. There might be less motion, but anyway, that's going to be up to you. It's not necessary to do it on the clavicle. I do it on the spine personally, and it should work fine. So you're going to add a virtual bone for the hand L. And then once you do that, just deselect it and then select it again, and you'll be able to see it in the viewport. If you can't see it in the viewport, come over here to Bones and check Selected Only, and it'll only show that single bone that you have selected. So as you can see, we have a bone now that goes from the spine to the hand, and that's what we want. And then I like to rename these, but you don't have to rename them. You can just keep the default name the default name is going to be the bone it starts at and the one it's going to, or the bone that is coming from and the bone that is going to. And I'll call that hand primary. And so you'll do this for the right hand. I'm doing this for the left hand just to show you how it's done, but do it for the right hand. And then on the right hand, you're going to make one that goes from the right hand to the left hand. I'm going to do it just for demonstration purposes, going from the left hand to the right hand. And I'm going to call it hand R support. And this is going to be a support reference for whenever we're holding the gun in the a gun or a bow in the left hand, and we need the right hand to be at a specific place relative to the gun, basically. And so now you'll see we have a virtual bone going from the left hand to the right hand, and it's called VB space handor underscore support. If you ever need to get these names for the anim graph, if it ever wants you to type in the name manually, then you can come over here to the skeleton, right click and just copy bone names. It'll copy the VB space plus what you named it, because when you name these, it automatically adds VB space to the, it automatically prefixes these with VB space. So that's basically how that works. So you're going to add whatever virtual bones are going to be the primary ones. Those are mostly the ones you're worried about. The ones on the hands, you don't have to worry about those because we're already layering the hands right here, you see? And so those virtual bones on going from one hand to the other, they'll already be where they're supposed to be. Therefore, you don't need to add those to this VB underscore primary. That's why it's called VB underscore primary. And so I'll add VB space Handel underscore primary to that. And you can add, you know, whichever ones you made, just add them under this VB space primary. And now that brings us to the actual data assets that I had you originally create for these. So under the data assets for the bone mask, the PDA bone mask, you're going to create a bone mask weight. This just allows you to turn it on and off. You don't need this necessarily. You'll probably never have it weighted any more than 100% or 0%. And you're probably only going to ever turn it off if you just want to see what it looks like with it off. So this isn't actually necessary. I just added it to be thorough. You also are probably not going to need this one either, but you will need the bone mask and the bone mask definition data asset. So this is of type bone mask. Just type in bone space mask, and I'll go ahead and show you. So you have bone mask right here. And then you have a bone mask under object types. You have a bone mask definition data asset. You're going to make an object reference for that. That's going to reference, and go ahead and set your defaults. So this one is just going to be your DABM underscore general, the one that we just created. I'm going to set this back to what I had it. And for the bone mask, just go ahead and compile it so that you can set these defaults. And what you would do is you would just do this. So your defaults are probably going to be spine, about 20. You're probably going to have this vary between like 20% and 60%. You're probably never going to turn it up higher than 60% mesh space on the spine. You're never going to use local space on the spine, the pelvis, the head, neck, or legs. Okay, that's probably never going to happen. If you do that, it's going to look weird and jerky. You're not going to want to ever do that. You will, however, though, often use local space for the arms. In this case, I'm applying local space first and then mesh space, just so that you know when this bone mask definition gets evaluated, it'll apply local space first and then mesh space. So why do I apply local and mesh space for this particular case? Normally, if you're not using a blend depth, then applying any amount of local space before mesh space will have absolutely no effect on the outcome. But if you are applying the blend depth, then the bones that are affected by the blend depth will also that aren't 100% weighted, will also partially be weighted first in local space and then in mesh space. You'll get a better outcome on those arms, on the clavicle R and upper arm, and it'll help prevent any desync. So that's why we're doing that. We're doing both of those 100%. Now for the VB underscore primary, we just want those to be where they're supposed to be, okay? We want those primary bones to be basically where the hands should be. If the hands were only applied 40%. This isn't going to perfectly place it back where we need it to be. We are applying the spine only 40%, but then we're applying this 100%. So this will actually make sure that the primary bones are where they're supposed to be relative to the scene for this. Yeah. It should correct it. Yeah, it should correct it. And yeah. You actually do want this part of it, just so that you know you kind of need this part. Otherwise, you're going to have issues. Because those virtual bones, the virtual bones are where we're going to copy the motion onto, and then we're going to we're going to use IK to make the arms follow this. Now, why are we also layering the arms if we're going to make the arms follow these virtual bones? Well, the reason why is because we still need to know where the arms are supposed to be. And also, this will still affect like how the arms are posed to some degree, even though we're using IK, just so you know. That's the reason why you still need these to be driven 100%. This is only going to be when aiming primarily. When you're not aiming and you don't need stability, you're probably just going to have it applied in local space and just a little bit or none at all in mesh space. So outside of aims, you might have something like this, or you might have it like this. Or you might have it like that. Like, I don't know what's happening here. There we go. So something along those lines. But this right here is, you're going to want it 100% mesh space when you're aiming. That gives you stability. The local space is important because it just keeps the arms moving local to the torso. Whatever you did on the torso right here. All right. So that basically explains the bone mask and how that works. I'm going to show you how to set this up after I explain all this stuff to you, but I want to explain all this stuff to you first and how all of this works. You'll see that we have our rifle aiming pose for this specific state. We have that plugged into the blend pose 0, and that's going to get layered using those settings onto our locomotion pose. So you are going to want to cache the locomotion pose. That brings us over here to copy bone motion. That's going to be the most difficult one to explain. So I'm going to stop the video here actually, and then I'll do a separate video for the copy bone motion, and then I'll do a third video where I cover the copy bone advanced, why we use that, and how to set up the leg IK properly, and why I chose this specific setup. And then I'll follow up with another video where we actually set this stuff up inside of the animation graph.